You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cricket Podcast, where we're going to be talking the IPL 2024. We've got a full 10-team auction preview, talking about who's been released, who's been traded, who's been retained, and what players will be up for grabs. Who's going to be making mega money? That's really the question that we're all here to discuss. Max is going to be hosting a Millionaire Maker segment at the end of the podcast. If you want to hang around for that, we're going to kick off with the Mumbai Indians. For each team, we'll run through the key releases, whether there are any trades, what their purse at auction will be, and what they're missing, and where we might see them make some moves next Tuesday. So for Mumbai, basically, release-wise, it was a bad year to be a Mumbai overseas seamer. Jofra Archer, Dwan Jansen, Jai Richardson, Riley Meredith, Chris Jordan all ditched. Tristan Stubbs also kicked out, which maybe raised a couple of eyebrows. He was on a fairly low contract. And then there were some locals as well that they ditched, and I didn't even bother writing their names down. So some other guys. The kind of big news, and I imagine there'll be some discussions here, is what they've already done. So Hardik Pandya, and on our last show we talked about this at some length, is now back as a Mumbai Indian, set up to be the long-term captain, and really does make a substantial improvement to this team. To facilitate that, Cameron Green was shipped out to Royal Challengers Bangalore. Nobody really knows why that happened, but that's RCB, isn't it? And Romario Shepherd, as mentioned earlier in the show, is in and has turned into Andre Russell. So yeah, more good news for Mumbai Indians. They are going to have 17.75 crore, so that's about what, £1.7 million to $2 million to splash around at the auction, which isn't loads. I mean, there's some teams with a much bigger purse to spend, and with that money, they'll need to fill 8 positions, including 4 overseas slots. So they could really bulk out the international section of their roster, and that might play quite well for them. I think they've got an all-rounder, so they can kind of have their pick of the base price overseas players who aren't all-rounders, I reckon. What are they missing? Well, first of all, I think we probably need to say they are quite a good team. There's the return of Hardik Pandya does improve them, and with the cash available, I think they can probably make moves to cover where they've got weaknesses. The biggest one, I think it's fair to say, is overseas pacers. In fact, pace bowling in general is a little bit weak once you get past Bumrah and Hardik if he bowls. So I'd expect a good chunk of that money to be splashed in that area, and perhaps they'll look to see if they can find a backup for Piyush Chawla, who is now, he actually was there when Julius Caesar was murdered. I don't know if you know this. He was present in the Senate in Rome. He's that old. That's my summary of what Mumbai need. Dad, I'll go to you first as the expert. Am I right with my Mumbai calls, first of all? And if they could pick a dream player, who would you be signing?
A fit job for Archer. Look, I think they're actually gonna struggle to make a lot of inroads into their squad in terms of proven quality at this level in the auction. They've got, as you say, just over 17 crore to spend. They need to cover 4 overseas and 4 domestics if they want a 25-man squad. That leaves them just over 2 crore per player on average. So what I do expect to happen is that they'll go and try and spend no more than 5 crore on those 4 overseas players. It's been a Mumbai tactic for quite a long time that they'll fill the squad with a few cheap overseas towards the back end of the auction. And I can see that easily happening again. They're going to have to reinforce paces. Wouldn't even shock me if they picked up, say, a Rayhan Ahmed for not a lot of money as well. And they seem to like scouting young gems, and I think he's definitely fits into that bracket. And I think that, as you say, Jack, they're going to need a domestic pacer.
Shivam Mavi.
He's the first one on my list, actually. Guys like him, Kartik Tyagi, Chetan Sakaria, something like that. then they might have to pay good money because there's scarcity of resources of domestic pacers as well. So I expect them to probably spend 2/3 of their budget at least on domestics and some cheap overseas as sort of squad cover as well.
Mumbai, Max, anything to add? I think they're actually quite a simple team to sum up going into this auction. I think the moves they made before are the story as much as anything.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the big news is obviously Hardik, and that solves a big issue for them in terms of balance of the side. But I sort of do think they could struggle to get what they want with the purse they've got, because there are a lot of teams out there looking for pace bowlers in this mini auction, and there's a reasonable amount of it available in the overseas market, but they're going to be going for big bucks because there's some teams out there with over 30 crore to spend, and they can just price you out the game. So they're going to have to be smart about it, that's for sure. But I think just a couple of smart acquisitions makes them already like a pretty solid team. So I don't think it matters too much, but depth may be where they struggle.
Yeah, fair.
I wonder, Ross, Dilshan Madashankar, the new Trent Bolt. Talk to me.
I don't see it happening, if I'm perfectly honest. I think that Sri Lankan players and Bangladeshi players are criminally overlooked, I think, in the IPL kind of auctions typically, and it takes something brave to kind of happen in that space, unless your name's kind of Malinga. That happens. I can see the Lord rocking up here. I can.
No way.
They'll go in for Lord. They'll get outpriced for him because he's going to be a millionaire maker, I can imagine, on Max's show later on. And someone like Harshal Patel they'll be going in for, but again, I think they'll be priced out of what they're looking at. So you're looking at a little bit more inexperience. And
they get a new Ned Cat.
But that does come with risk as well, right? But I wouldn't be surprised if kind of someone like Umesh Yadav actually ends up there either. That you're trying to get a bit more experience into that lineup, that they can kind of be like, you know what, can hit a few sixes at the end if they're lucky. But as I think as you said, Jack, for Mumbai, they've been bloody brilliant. Getting in Hardik Pandya is just unbelievable. They had a big glaring. I don't know when we were talking on the show after the last mini auction, it was a bit like they have filled their team out with some absolute shite players, and here they've managed to maneuver themselves quite nicely. And the fact that RCB took Cameron Green off their hand was a good thing, even if they would have just released him back into the auction.
Right, should we move on? Mumbai, I think they'll be one of the more boring teams at the auction. That's my take. I don't know if we're rating that, but that's. They already blew up the whole tournament, didn't they? Hardik Pandya, like it's already a farcical narrative in the IPL. Who's going next? Ross, Royal Challengers Bangalore. You're down to get the rundown.
RCB. Oh, what a team! What a team! They're such an annoying franchise. They have pressed the terminate button on a lot of their players, which means they're going to be busy. However, because they picked up Cam Green for 17.75 crore, it means they don't have the flexibility that they probably needed in the auction. They've only got 23 crore left, with 6 slots available, and 3 of them are overseas. I think they're actually in quite a tricky position, if I'm perfectly honest, lads. I think that some of what they've got is brilliant, but how can they maneuver the market when other people are going to be in that space is quite difficult. They have released big players like Hasaranga, Harshal Patel, Hazelwood and Finn Allen, along with kind of their backup of cheap players like Bracewell, David William, Wayne Parnell. And unfortunately, Kedar Yadav is going back into the pool, so we might see his name come back round. There was a little bit of trades in this space, so Cameron Green, but also Mayank Dagger for Shabazz Ahmed. And I must admit, I quite liked Shabazz Ahmed, but then I looked at his stats and there was no reason to like him. So it was completely my eyes deceiving me. What they need, decent domestic talent, because they've done the classic thing of kind of almost like Galacticos of spending all their money on a few overseas players and then trying to fill it with some less good people. So they're going to have to be back in the market for Harshal Patel. That's what I can imagine they'll do. They did it last time. They released him and then tried to get him back and ended up paying more for him. If I won't be surprised if something like that happens again. They've got Reece Topley as kind of their main overseas bowler. As all England fans know, he's actually made out of glass. So you need a replacement.
Single glazing as well.
So yeah, it's very so. Would I be surprised? Would I be surprised if they pretty much blow all of their budget on kind of Stark or Kurtzer? No, I wouldn't. And then they're having to kind of go round the edges on some of the other parts. There is some, I think, options around picking up some cheap fast bowlers who could be good. So someone like Jamie Overton or Daniel Sams. And then, yeah, the domestic pacers, yeah, Harshal Patel, the Lord, Sakaria, Tyagi, Mavi, they're going to have to be in there. They need to rebuild. The fact that Akash Deep is kind of one of the first names that you've got in the bowling department is a worry. Sharat Khan is another name I've got down here. I think they need a domestic batter. I'm not sure Manish Pandey is going to do the business for them, but I do think the kind of that number 6 role is probably one they want to fill. And there's probably a need for like a leg spinner or a left arm spinner. I don't think they're going to be able to afford Hasaranga. They might be daft enough to go for Rachin Ravindra. This is definitely a potential franchise for him. But the big move they're going to probably have to make is the redemption arc of Shreyash Gopal, and it's starting right here, right now.
Okay. Dan, you can go first again. Give us your thoughts on RCB.
So they released a plethora of bowlers: Hasaranga, Harshal Patel, Hazelwood, who was only going to be partially available, I think, Dave Willey, even though he'll be fully available, and traded out Shabazz Ahmed for Matt Dagger. So logically speaking, and the fact that they really don't have a great deal of bowling in their squad whatsoever, you would think that their 23 or so crawl would be devoted mostly to bowling reinforcements. So based on our RCB's auction strategy in the past, I expect them to pay 15 crore for Travis Head. In all seriousness, I mean, Andy Flower is a smart operator, and what he does like doing is packing a team with a lot of batting depth. So
Loves an all-rounder, doesn't he?
What he does, and Ross, I think you mentioned one earlier, Daniel Sams. I know he's been a bit of an Andy Flower favourite over in the past, so I could see that happening for sure. In terms of skill set, I think they need a top spinner, but there isn't any in the auction apart from the one that they've released. So that's
and they're not getting him back.
Yeah, but at least they can afford Cameron Green, lads. All right, that's what enabled to happen.
But maybe with the England connections of a few of their sort of decision makers, Rayhan Ahmed could be he could be a sort of the commodity with a couple of teams. They've got to go for the one, if not two, frontline domestic pacers. So it's that sort of trio of Mavi, Sakaria, Tyagi, etc. And I think they're probably, because of the scarcity of resources, which is often what happens in this mini auction dynamic, they're going to go for more than they're probably worth, which I think makes life difficult for RCB in terms of sort of reinforcements. What I do think they need as well is another keeper, but because I don't have much faith in either Ajrawat or sort of the semi-retired Dinesh Karthik. Although Karthik, to be fair, did have a pretty decent Vijay Hazare trophy, but didn't play smart. Hasn't played T20 since last year's IPL. So it's a lot of faith in two players. I think that could struggle if they do want to go down the keeper road. There's nothing really in the domestic market of any real note. Two keepers who I think probably the best options in terms of keeper batters will be Josh Inglis and probably less of a keeper, but still a keeper, Ben Duckett, and maybe Phil Salt as well. There'll be some options there in terms of keeper batters for them to look at. And I think they need an all-rounder as well, possibly from the overseas market. And I think someone else brought it up earlier. Could they get Harshal Patel back or try to for less money?
I mean, that's what they want to do, isn't it? That's why they've released him. I think probably the same with Hasaranga. They've gone like Harshal Patel didn't have a good year last year, so we can get him back on the cheap. Hasaranga didn't play last year because he was injured. We can get him back on the cheap. Neither of those things are happening. Like they're in dreamland.
The problem is, like, everybody not associated with RCB can remember more than 1 year ago. And that means that all the other teams are slightly more clued in. Max, question for you, and then we'll move on. Would it be better if they weren't paying Virat Kohli 15 crore?
No, Virat Kohli is RCB and shall remain RCB, and he, I mean, 15 crore these days doesn't even seem like that much when you're paying Cameron Green 17.5. It seems like a comparative bargain. I think I mean they're all those things you just listed, Dan. They've got to do that with 23 crore. So good luck.
Which they didn't have to do. Literally, we're doing the laughing. We're like 40 odd in the bank, and they literally just been like, oh, they literally could have got Cam Green for cheaper than 17 crore, I reckon, if they literally just let him go in the market.
Yeah, almost certainly. But I
I
mean,
left with about 25 lakh to spend at the auction.
I mean, they've got rid of all their bowling, and what they did last year was basically have good batting that just ended at about 6, and they've got to fix that gap as well, while also trying to fix what they've just done to themselves. So yeah, I don't know, it's all a bit weird, but it might work out somehow.
Max, can you talk us through KKR, and then we'll take a break? Got to pick up the pace as we get through these teams.
Well, there's a theme with these two, with KKR and RCB, because KKR have done the same thing. They've got rid of all of their pace bowling. They've released Tim Southee, they've released Umesh Yadav, Lockie Ferguson, gone, cut, Charles Tukur, gone, he's out of there. And they've also got rid of a few of their overseas, David Visa, not surprising, Lytton Das, he's out of there. Shakib Al Hassan, also gone. So they've retained their batting, and they've got rid of their bowling. They've also retained some old West Indies players, Andre Russell and Sunil Narine, still there for their retirement tour. But unlike RCB, they do have 32 crore to spend on sorting this out. So it's maybe not that as desperate as it could have been. A couple of surprises in who they retained: Ramnula Gurbaz and Jason Roy. Given sort of what we said about actually like overseas batting is quite deep when it comes to IPL auctions, and you can probably get something a bit better or very similar for the same sort of price, or maybe even less. So it's interesting that they've gone down that route. But it's what they've done. But obviously their main focus is going to have to be seam bowling, because they got rid of it all. They might try and get some of their guys back at a price reduction. Obviously, Sheldon Tukur was quite expensive in the trade that they made for him last year. Umesh Yadav is getting on, Tim Southee's getting on, Lockie Ferguson's injury issues. So I mean that's something they could do, but realistically I think they should just look for new options. Harshal Patel obviously will be one. Death bowling's not necessarily something that KKR have had loads of fun with recently. Harshal Patel could be an option. He's not great at it according to last year, but that could change when he gets away from the Chinnaswamy. And then power play options. A left arm would probably be quite nice. You got Mr. Fizzer, you got Mitchell Stark. I think they can go in quite heavily for someone like Mitch Stark. They've got money to burn on pace bowlers, so they can have a look. They can shop around. They can try and drive up some prices early, see where they land. Spin sorted. Don't need to worry about that. That's one tick. But the other hole they need is a wicket keeper, because
no, you don't need a wicket keeper. KKR's whole strategy is very, very clear. You do not need a wicket keeper.
They totally fucked that up last year, and then they've got rid of the two that they actually had aside from that. Jagadish.
Can't Gurbaz wicket keep?
Yes, he's the one they've got. They've got one wicket keeper. It's Ramnula Gurbaz. So that's not going to work, is it? They could do with a couple. There's actually a couple of good options. Phil Salt would be one. I think Phil Salt would be a great guy to go for. He's also just better than Gurbaz, so that would work. And you've already said, Dan, Josh Inglis, another guy who would work really nicely. They can open the batting with either of them, would be better than Gurbaz. But then you go back to, well, why have they got Gurbaz and Roy? They need a wicketkeeper. They can get a better one, and they're just going to be sat on the bench. So that's a bit weird.
Gurbaz is 50 lakh. Like he's so cheap.
That's true. There's no, and he would only go up. So I mean, I guess that does make some sense.
He's a great prospect. I think it was an absolute no-brainer to keep him. Unless so Jason Roy, I'm very surprised because there's just a plethora of.
He's a Night Riders global redemption.
Yeah, it's the brand. Probably in his contract. One other thing I did read, a rumor, was that apparently KKR rejected a Shardul Thakur for Harshal Patel trade during the trade window. Yeah.
Oh. Don't get enough trade rumors. I don't even know how to react to that. We should have more trade rumors.
Where's the IPL
trade rumors?
we have like a version of IPL version of Jim White.
Do we? We don't know. We should do that.
If we start making the rumors, they might actually start happening. But yeah, I mean, where do you guys stand on KKR? I mean, I think to me it's fairly cut and dry that obviously they've just got loads of money and they need to spend it on a new bowling attack. But I don't know if there's anything else, Dan, that you'd pick up on.
A few things. Look, I think that they've got some really. It's going to be a tough auction for them to construct a squad that can push for top four. I've got a lot of concerns about this squad. They've kept Andre Russell at 12 crore. He had over 11 economy last year and struggled with the bat. He's looked like he's back with a toothpick in the T10 recently, as did Jason Roy on a lot of occasions as well. My concern is that he's going to be 36 pretty soon, and age and injuries may well be catching up with him. So for me, it makes sense to have a backup for him somehow, and from an overseas perspective, someone like Jason Holder, maybe, I don't know, some form of pace bowling all rounder. The other thing as well is that they've got just over 30 crore, but they've got 12 spots to potentially fill, of which 4 are overseas. So actually, that works out as the 4th lowest average crore per player required out of all the 10 teams. So it's not a huge budget as a lot of people think, because they've got to do so much surgery on their squad. I think they really need overseas and domestic paces. Good luck with that, especially from the domestic market, because there's not many of them. They need domestic top order batters that don't really exist, which is a subject that I want to kind of bring up a little bit, because I've looked at the sets for the auction sets, and in the first 36 players in the first 6 categories, there's just 2 domestic batters, and that is Manish Pandey and Karun Nair, who are both in the first bracket, which is caps batters 1. Now, because of that, and I've seen this at first hand, the auction dynamics mean that there's a pretty high chance that a team's going to want to lock in that domestic batter pretty quickly. So I can see a bidding war for Manish Pandey for not a lot of reason. So yeah, you heard it here first. Could they get Pat Cummins back from after letting him go a couple of years back? One other player that I think they might keep an eye on would be Rafiq Salam, who had a good side Mushtaq Ali Trophy after coming back from some time out of cricket. And he was there before as well, so they obviously think pretty highly of him. That wouldn't surprise me if they went for someone like him too.
Cool. Should we take a break and then we can come back and we'll move down the list? We've still got 7 teams to go.
Yep.
7 teams to go.
These ones will be quicker though.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back in a moment.